won't go in as an amendment, but I'm going to try to put it out there. Several of the speakers, including Kim, referred to this issue. And basically, this really has to do with kind of patient testimony. And this is what the amendment says. The equivalent of 1 hour of each meeting day will be dedicated to receive testimony from public witnesses, delivered either in person, by telephone, or by video. The period of time allocated to each witness shall be not less than 5 minutes. Witnesses can use their allocated time to read a prepared statement, to offer comments on committee reports or discussion, or to ask questions of the committee. So that's the motion. And I know there's several parts of that, but I wanted to throw that out there for discussion because it does open up kind of what we have had, and I'm happy to give my explanation for it. And really, a lot of this did come from Kim's testimony as well as several others. But I wanted to see if it first gets seconded.
How much of the time did you just say?
What?
What part of the time of our meeting?
So basically 1 hour of each day meeting. So if there's 2-day meeting, there'd be 1 hour on one day, 1 hour the second day. And each person...
Is that in addition to what currently is there?
That would just be total. And there would be basically 5 minutes per person as opposed to 3 minutes.
And if they ask questions of the committee, would that time allocation be in there too? Like our time to answer those questions?
And within that 5 minutes, they would have to decide how they wanted to use that 5 minutes. By the way, I'm sort of making comments on the motion. Maybe I could first make sure is it seconded, and then I'd be happy to kind of elaborate. Does anybody want to second that?
I'll second for discussion purposes.
Okay.
One of the I think you're lumping too much into one thing, and I particularly go what I think Susan was going to. How many of us have got? You're now going to charge someone who's got 3 questions for the committee, and they're going to ask 3 different committee members, and they've got 5 minutes, and the first one takes 4 minutes to answer the question. Not because we're just jabbering; it's a complex question. I would suggest, as a friendly amendment, to drop that one out and then add it separately as to allow them to submit written questions that then could be, by the chair, put to the right person, and then parse out a period of time and say, all right, here are the comments from the questions that have been submitted to the committee members. We could do it in a much more organized and succinct fashion. And then that way it doesn't stick different, because different questions are going to take different periods of time to answer.
I'll accept that friendly amendment.
Very friendly.
Very friendly by Dr. Marshall. Yes.
Thank you. And that point's well taken. I mean, we want to allow the public comment to be as free as it can be, and maybe when we start to look at how we restructure our meetings, we might build in some answer time in the same way that they have very often at conferences, where we can address a number of specific questions that have been asked of the group. So we can look at that a little further down the line.
By the way, if you go back to prior kind of coordinating committee meetings, there was more flexibility during some of those times. And I think some of those exchanges were extremely helpful and helped educate the committee members. And I just think it gives us a little more flexibility.
Great. So is there any further discussion on the friendly amended motion?
And what is the motion?
Do we want to add to that motion that there are some organizations who will automatically have time to present this, to ask questions? That was something that I've heard ideas about that.
I don't see that as a friendly amendment, Art. And again, I personally think that, but you can make that a separate amendment if you want. But my preference is to really give a wide variety of people an opportunity to talk. And certainly if you have 2 days, 5 minutes each, the major organizations and people who watch these things closely will get a chance to talk. I think...
I don't want to guarantee that. You're just going to say they will, but without guaranteeing it.
I think that, just like right now, our committee can, if we wanted to, ask a particular person to come up here and talk to us. I think we always have that option.
Can I ask one question now? How do you determine the order in which people are speaking based upon the available time?
This is an excellent operational bylaws sort of question, because historically, most of our meetings, we've actually had 2 hours of public comment on one day and an hour on the second. We've had to jigger that time sometimes. You know, it might be an hour and 45 minutes, one and, 45 minutes the next day, whatever. But we have always been able to accommodate the requests for public comment, particularly once we started allowing telephone presentation. We didn't require people to be there in person. This time, because it was limited, it's a one-day meeting, 30 minutes, we knew we had limited slots, even at the best of circumstances, 10 people, and more reasonably, 7 or 8. So since we opened the period for response for filing to request public comment for 2 weeks, I think it was about 2, it might have been 3 weeks, we would have filled our slots at the end of the second day, and everybody who asked after that would have been waitlisted. Some people dropped off of their own. They requested, and then they emailed back and said, whatever. We finally decided to draw names. So we put the names in a hat, held the hat like this, and a third party reached up overhead and drew names. Every hat was shaken 7 to 10 times. And names were folded. All of this we did as best as we could. Yeah, exactly. Short of random number assignments, but decided to draw names, and we then put them out on the table, and that was the sorting. So I believe in what turned out, 2 people who commented would have been among the original sort. Others would have been right on that hump, were they 7 or 9 or whatever, and then others, further down the wait list. We didn't deny anyone an opportunity to comment. Everyone was put in the same hat, and it was a matter of drawing by lot in which you were selected. We just felt that was the fairest, because there are many people who don't have access all the time. They may have been sick those first 2 weeks. This circumstance was unique. But that's specifically something I think could be addressed in the bylaws if the requests for public comment exceed, even at 5-minute slots with a total of 2 hours available. In best of circumstances, that would be, 24 people or something.
Now, with the bylaws, is those separate from the charter?
Yes. The charter is meant to address the operations under the Federal Advisory Committee Act, how we are going to adhere to the requirements for, it's a public meeting, has to be announced so many days, those sorts of things. It lays down the base operating procedure and tells the public this advisory committee adheres to these parts of the Federal Advisory Committee Act. No parts are optional, but this is how we are attending to these various elements, function, structure, meetings, etc., making that open public from the start.
So what I'm hearing is that it may well not be a problem, that everybody that wants to speak will get to speak.
Historically, that's been the case.
And so I would suggest let's try it. If it does turn out to be a problem, then we'll go back and revisit the issue and see if we can make some further accommodation. Nancy.
So this amendment, if there's only 30 minutes worth of people that sign up, what do we do for the extra half hour that we've just said is public?
And that's a problem with under a charter offering minimum
hour,
right.
Times.
You're required to do it, whether you fill that slot or not. You could have people come up to the microphone. You might want to do that. But you've got to think about the consequences of putting something in the charter that then you are required to do every meeting, every single meeting.
We could have a proviso in there saying that. Go on. You want to say it?
Yeah, no, if you said, would it not cover to say up to 1 hour each day?
Or you could say it would be 1 hour provided that there's enough individuals expressing interest in speaking. Either way, there's ways you could sort of kind of give yourself more flexibility.
Up to would do it.
Up to would do it.
Up to?
Would that work, Counselor? Up to? I always turn to a lawyer to ask.
Good to have one on the...
My son's a lawyer. Thank you so much.